In the previous video, what we looked at was building out our ability to do a graph. And it worked out fairly well, but there's a few refinement areas that we have. So one is here we can see that although we have the color blue, we didn't actually label what that represents. So our legend isn't quite complete. The other thing is, in our data set, we had multiple years with the data, but this will only show data, like one set of data for each month. So if we had data for last year and for this year in January, right now we're only going to show this year's data. If we had no data for February, we're going to show last year's data. So although it works, it's got a few imperfections in it. So what we want to do tonight, or during this video, is to add in a second data series, and we're going to clean up the legend just so we can see things a little bit easier. And we'll look at how can we color each data series different from each other. Because right now, if we add another data series, it's going to be in blue, the way we styled our CSS. So first, let's look at the data that we have to work with. I'm going to go into Workbench here. So I've added in some extra data points so that we can have a more complete set of data to work with. And I've updated our query here. So it's going to show the year, that the year is the first column, and then it'll be the month, right? So you can see here, year, month, and then the number of hours that were worked in each month. So in order to do that, we have to group by both year and month so that we don't combine data together like year-over-year data. And then I said order it by year and month. So if I look here in my data, I've got a few hours in January of 2015, and then I've got hours in January, February, March, April, basically for every month of 2016. And then when we get, whoops. Then we get into 2017, we've got a lot of data for each month up till November. So what we want to do now is, if we look at this graph, this is actually 2016 data, this is 2017 data, so it's actually not quite right. So let's fix it up. Now, if we look in our controller class, so we're going to go into our source, our views, and we call this monthly hours view. If we look in our controller class, when we built this out, we had this method that said populate series from database, and we had one series. Okay, so the series, when we look at it, that's what's actually populating those bar charts. And what it does is, in our query here, we had the year, and we grouped it by year and by month. We didn't order it per se. But what it does is, when it has information for a specific month, it will keep overwriting it with whatever the latest data is. So I'm going to add in here the order by clause. Make sure we've got things explicitly in the right order. And when we go to create this series, what we have to do is we have to actually think about previous year's data versus this year's data. And in order to do that, we're going to need two data series, right? So right now, everything goes into one data series, and as information comes in, it kind of overwrites the previous data. So if we go up here, and where we have our data series, I'm going to change this one to say current year series. And let's create another one called previous year series. Now we're going to have two data series, and we're going to have to add both of them to our chart. And if we want the we want to see the name of these. So you see here how we set our labels previously. for our series, we can also do things. We can say current year series equals, or sorry. Now, this will take in a string value. And basically what we want is, we want whatever the current year is, we're going to say local date.now get year. That will return an integer. So then we have to convert that into a string. So we're going to say integer string so every year, this will give us whatever the current year is, right? So when this is the legend. So when we go, oh yeah, it's not gonna load because we have some errors. But this is basically the legend. So we want to say 2017 in this case, and then the previous year's series. We set the name there. We're going to do something basically the same, but we're going to say their string -1, right? So whatever the current year is, -1. So that's going to be the previous year and the current year. Now this is a nice way to do it because it'll always keep us current, right? I could hard code in the actual year for this year, but then next year my graph's going to be out of date. So that's no good. Then we're going to populate the series from the database. And here, after we've populated our series, okay, so we're going to look at how to do that in a second, but then we're going to add in our two series, and it will show them in the order that they're added. So I want to do the previous years first. Right, so we're going to go previous year series. And then I'm going to say the current year. Okay, so what this does is now it's actually going to have two sets of data in the same graph. And all that's really left is for us to update now. Instead of putting all data in one series, I need to decide how to split it between these two series. So I go down to my method here to populate the series from the database. And this part all looks the same. And where it's going to change is inside of our while loop. So in the while loop, we need to handle that scenario. We need to decide if it's a current year or not. So we're going to say if result set, it's that first column. So remember, our first column is the year. If that equal to current year, right? So what we did before is we said, okay, we take our series. So I'm going to say this is our current year series. I'm going to get the data. I'm going to add a new XY chart data point, and it's going to be our second column, which is month name, and the amount of hours worked, which is our third column. Else, and we're going to do another if statement here, because we need to find out if it's the previous year. So remember, we could have 10, 20 years worth of data in our table, but we really only care about if it's the current year or the previous year. Okay, so current year, then put it in the current year series. If it's a previous year, put it in the previous year's series. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Let the data go. Okay, so that will loop over our result set, and we could handle that probably even a little more dynamically here in our SQL statement. We could add a where clause, right? Where the where is going to be either the current year or the previous year. For now, because our data set's small, I'm just going to handle it here. And that looks like it cleans up all of our layers. So let's try running this now. So now, when we look at our data set, we can see 2016 comes first for each month, and then the 2017 comes after. Now, what this doesn't show us, unfortunately, is very clearly which one's which, because they're both in blue. And we set that previously in our, oh, I guess we have to hook up that button. Let's deal with the colors first. So what we did before is we said on the bar chart, fill this in blue. Now, the only challenge with that is now everything will be blue. If we didn't specify anything for our bar charts, it would actually dynamically change the color automatically with kind of shades of orange. Let's just comment this out for now. And what we can do is we can say default color 0, chart dash bar. We can still keep our blue, and maybe we'll show the second series in green. See how that looks. So we view the hours. Now we see that our legend has 2016 as blue, and our legend has 2017 as green, and then we can see the trends. So year over year now we can see is green in general bigger than blue, meaning more people are working or volunteering. At the time of creating this, we didn't have any data for December yet because we haven't got to December yet in the calendar. So this is all working nice, and all we have to do now is really hook up this back button because I noticed that's not working. So let's go into our controller, monthly hours view controller. Clean this up here. So we have, in terms of methods, we have one for initialize and one for populate series from database. So we'll do our public void back button push. Have our scene changer that we created in a previous video that helped us move between scenes nice and easily. And we're going to say scene changer, change scenes. And we don't have to pass any data back. So we just pass in our event. The view that we want to load is called the volunteer table view.fxml. And we'll call it all volunteers. And because we're going to read from the database to load this file, we have the potential for an input-output exception. So I'm just going to put the throws clause there. And then we have to wire that up in our view. So we'll go to our monthly hours, oops, sorry, not that one, table view controller, sorry, our table view, oops, not that one, my mistake. It was our monthly hours view. And here we're going to click on the back button, go to code, and on the action, back button pushed, we'll run that method. Log in, view the hours, hit the back button. There we go. So our app's working much, much better now. In the next video, we're going to start looking at the idea of roles in the system. So if I'm an administrator, I can see certain screens that regular people cannot see, and controlling access to things. So that'll be in the next video. Look forward to having you watch it. Cheers.